some hoops and hollers for the energy stage?
Yeah.
Bitcoin 2026 on the Clean Spark Energy stage, and we're starting it out with a banger. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin's return to its roots, why home mining is making a comeback, and to lead this panel, to moderate, the man from Mississippi with the fine mustache, Mr. Tatum Turnip. Thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate you. If you were here yesterday, you know that I told you I used to live at Balaji Srinivasan's network school in Malaysia, the craziest place in the world. Check it out, ns.com. This guy was educating me on the back end of it from China originally, Mr. Leo Wang. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. I don't know if he needs an introduction. There's Madonna, there's Beyonce, and then there's Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, the creator of the BitAxe. Thank you, sir. And finally, he was backstage trying to figure out if he should add some tension. He said he might throw a chair, but they're pretty heavy. Mr. Avril Shukla, thank you for being here, sir. Gentlemen, have a wonderful talk.
Good morning, Las Vegas. How are we feeling today? It is the last day of the conference. I am super excited to be talking about home mining today with some killers in the space. Let's go ahead and start just introducing ourselves. I'm Tatum. I'm sales at Compass Mining, the Bitcoin mining guy, self-proclaimed. And I love talking about home mining, so they got me to talk about home mining. Go ahead and also add on, what does home mining mean to you after you explain who you are? You can go ahead and start.
Of course, thanks. So my name is Leo Wang. I'm the Vice President of Canaan. I joined Canaan in October 2021. I was also the first employee in North American regions representing the company. Canaan started as a home mining company. You know, we basically raised money back then with the founding team to tape out the first generation of ASIC chips. But even before that, our founder was the inventor of FPGA mining. He open sourced all his solutions to the community and started as a home mining promoter. We actually did several generations of home mining machines back in 2014. But the iteration of ASIC chips was just crazy. You had to deal with all these changing, parameters and competition from the newcomers like Bitmain and MicroBT. So we stopped that product line until more recently, 2024, which was exactly 10 years later, to push out the first generation of modern home miners.
Scott?
Hey, yeah, good morning. Thanks, Tatum. My name is Scott. I am a Bitcoiner. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a Freedom Tech advocate. A while back at the instigator of the BitAxe project. Now I work with the 256 Foundation to promote open source Bitcoin mining. Home mining to me is without a doubt the most resilient, most badass form of Bitcoin mining, of securing the Bitcoin network, right? Home miners cannot be shut down. They will not turn off. They will not unplug. They are here doing it like absolutely no matter what. So it's an incredibly important part, maybe insignificant share of the network hash rate for now, but an incredibly resilient bunch that just absolutely cannot be stopped.
Avril?
Scott. I'm Avril, founder of Altair Tech, Bitcoiner class of 2013, been mining Bitcoin since 2015. At Altair Tech, we really have one focus: to make it easy for people to mine Bitcoin, to democratize Bitcoin mining. We see this as the easiest way to get Bitcoin in people's hands. If everybody at home can mine Bitcoin quietly, wirelessly, and high hash rates and good efficiencies, maybe even profitably, they acquire Bitcoin without going through the exchanges, going through the KYC process. So we're super excited about, minting tens of millions of new Bitcoiners by, giving them their first Bitcoin miner.
Yeah, thanks guys. And unfortunately, they only gave us a 30-minute window. We asked for 6 hours to talk about everything home mining.
Let's go.
So yeah, there's a lot to cover. So one thing that I wanted to really harp on was that the title of this is Bitcoin's return to its roots. And what we've seen is home mining is making a resurgence. Whenever I first got into Bitcoin, everyone was wanting to get an S9, and you can get an S9 for $150. And Crypto Cloaks was printing shrouds, and people were putting them in as space heaters. And we see that kind of has changed the landscape of it all, and a lot more home mining is kind of focused on lottery miners, and then you also have other home miners being made that are intended to be space heaters or something like that. So how has the landscape changed, and what has changed for it to go from everyone needs a big miner, relatively speaking, to having a bunch of lottery miners or something like that? Scott, would you want to take this one first?
The home mining has changed because with the advent of actual home miners, of which the S9 is not. That is a very industrial machine. I had a stark realization of that. I moved into a new office a number of years ago, and electricity was included in the rent. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a mining god. Got myself a bunch of S9s, rewired the power so I had 220 over in the corner of the office, plugged them all in, let them rip, and it was like, within an hour, I was like, this is not going to work. I also have to exist in this office, and it was like, oh my gosh, like, I want to be mining. I want to be a part of this. I want to be doing this. I mean, I'm interested in it technically. I'm interested in it for the support of the Bitcoin network. But there is just not a realistic way for me to do it. Like, I'm a technical guy. I'm definitely into hacking and, figuring out how to put it in the basement. But like, I hypothesized at the time that there's a non-zero number of people that want to be doing this if there was only a realistic, reasonable, practical way for them to do it that isn't gonna like get them a divorce.
Yeah, it's always the life test that has to pass before you ship something. I know that, Avril, you said that you had a contrarian view to the lottery mining. Could you explain that a little bit and what you meant there?
Sure. So I think first of all, thanks Scott and OSMU and 250 Days Foundation. I think you guys have, there's an order of magnitude drop in the cost required to buy your first miner. A lot of it is the work you've done. Especially ESP32 controller, which is a lot cheaper than a full computer that you used to need to run, let's say, a Compact F or a USB miner. I think you guys have realistically brought in maybe 100 to 200,000 new home miners in the last 2 years. So thank you for that. But I think along with this resurgence of lottery mining, we've seen people just like, I would call this gambling addiction. Instead of buying one miner to learn about how to mine at scale, they buy 2, 10, 50, have a room full. I think they really need to go back to the basics and understand like what is it that they're trying to do, and understand that the way you scale, you want to decentralize the network, compete with the big guys. They're buying hash rate at $10 a terahash or less for new gen ASICs. You can't outrun them at $50, $100 a terahash. Buy your BitX, buy your Nano 3S, buy your small lottery miner, learn how to mine, tinker with it, but don't scale with it. For scaling, you need to go bigger, right? And we have so many options now. Canaan has a whole range of home miners that are over 1,000 watts. Great space heaters, go buy one of those. You can modify an ant miner. I would love to see more. I would love to see more home integration with some of these miners, things like Home Assistant, even integration with proprietary systems like Ring or Nest that a lot of us already use. Yeah. So if you want to outrun the big guys, you gotta do it at their cost. You can't pay an order of magnitude and then hire and expect to gain market share on them. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, and I have to give a quick shout out. You said you want to see more home automation. Shout out to Dylan and Tyler out in the audience who love that stuff. They are wizards with home automation and mining.
100%.
They're crazy. Leo, I want to ask you, what have you seen change? You said there was a whole decade between the first home miners that y'all were shipping and the more recent ones. What shifted to bring back that product and have a demand for it?
Where do I start? So yeah, Bitcoin at its early days back in 2010, 2011, there were 100% mined by home users, right? And people using CPU, GPUs. GPU has been very long time the mainstream of Bitcoin mining. So back then, there's only lottery. You know, the randomness is actually one of the key factor to make Bitcoin attractive to people, right? So I think back then 100% is lottery, but then mining pool appears, right? And people start to see an opportunity to put in more money in a sizable business. But hardware lacked until our founder, whose name is NG Zhang, dropped out from his PhD degree candidate, started to posting his open source codes on Bitcoin Talks forum, and people using that open source software to build their FPGA chips and machines. He shipped 2 generations of FPGA chips, meaning Icarus and Lancelot, two names he named after them. And then there was Butterfly Labs came out saying, you know, they have a different way of mining, which is called ASIC. So many different groups started developing ASICs, and our founding team was actually the first generation or the first team successfully sending out machines on ASIC chips.
The A1, right?
Yeah, Avalon. It's called Avalon.
Yeah.
It's just called Avalon because they didn't know that they were gonna have a second generation.
They didn't know there were going to
Yes.
be 16 generations.
So on the second generation, they pushed out 2 versions, the industrial version and the home version. The home version is called Avalon Nano, which is addressing to iPod Nano back then because it has different colors. Our design was a flash disk with different colors. People can use them on laptop to mine. The third generation Avalon also comes with Nano 2, but then they also had try to do a mini, an early stage heating machine back then, but that product never was marketed to market because they formed Bitman and started to attack us on cost and hash rate because Bitman was well capitalized from the start. Different from us, we were more like a geeky company, only funding ourselves from prepayments from our customers. Bitman was well funded in the beginning, so we were working so hard to kind of encounter that competition, and it was until recently we were able to save some strengths for home mining products.
Yeah, and I was debating on whether or not I want to bring this part up, but we're going to get into it, the open source and proprietary nature of it. I'm all for open source. We have Scott here who's like king open source. But the thing about mining is that we've seen a lot of proprietary build-outs. Like you can't buy these individual parts and build a miner. You have to buy a miner and break it down in order to rebuild it however you want to. So where do y'all see open source mining going with relation to home mining? Like, is it going to, obviously it's expanded drastically only in the past 1 or 2 years, I'd say. But where do y'all see it going in the near and far future? What's going to happen with the production of actual components that's going to be needed for these home miners?
I mean, it is absolutely going to take over and change the industry for the better with 100% certainty, to say the least. You mentioned that the BitAxe has sort of taken the home mining scene by storm, and I think that is in no small part because it is an open source project. It is completely permissionless. Anyone can get involved. When I started it seemed like it was an insurmountable task. I couldn't have done it by myself, but by the nature of being an open source project, like actual professionals in their field, extremely talented, dedicated people just showed up and they're like, I want to work on this. And that is what has made the BitAxe into what it is today, and in an incredibly short amount of time have a real impact. And I think that this, we're still at the beginning part of the exponential growth in like the progress and the development in Bitcoin mining that we can have from open source. When anyone can get involved, anyone can fork it and just start adding improvements, and then people can change on that. We're gonna, in no small amount of time, we're gonna look back at where we are today, and it's gonna be just completely, it's gonna look so distant and so antiquated from where we're gonna be in a short period of time. It is insane what open source can do. I mean, we've seen this happen in other industries before. Microsoft used to make proprietary web server products, and I don't think, basically no one runs that anymore, right? You can just take these tools, you can just start a new company with a groundbreaking new technology in your garage, in your dorm room, whatever. No one can stop you, and I think all the proprietary miners are going to see this, and they're either going to jump on board or basically be forced to by the progress of their competitors.
I want to expand on that question a little bit too, and Leo, you can answer this one. I think you might have a good insight on when this obviously will continue to snowball the open source movement. These big players like Bitmain, MicroBT, and what do you foresee happening with them as far as embracing it or fighting against it, or how do you see that duality playing out over the course of the future?
I can't speak for our competitors. I cannot speak for them, but I think it has largely embedded in the roots of Canaan as a company. As I explained, we were starting as a founding group of open source and Bitcoin mining ourselves, and there are practical reasons why in the last decade it was, most of the manufacturers weren't as proactive as Scott and 256 Foundation as we should be. And the reason is more technical than ideological. I think most of the ASIC chips in the past 10, 12 generations were joint developed by the designer and our foundry partners who fabricate these chips for us. So it's very hard to separate their effort and our effort and open source everything. But on the other side, I do believe open sourcing is important in the case that people are no longer or not majorly pursuing more and more hash rate and efficiency or profitability, but rather to use Bitcoin mining as the technology to tap into energy play in modern society. Nowadays, we are seeing increasingly more cases on our end in the US and in Europe to use Bitcoin mining as a way to capture the stranded energy and recycle heat. I think that's the key of Bitcoin mining as a prolonged business for the community, not just for one single manufacturer. And I do think that's a very meaningful way for people to take control of their home and their energy as a strategic thinker. Because going forward, AI is going to replace a lot of our jobs. People would be working with AI agents, robotic agents at home. If you think about it, in the past, recycling heat wasn't a thing, only because we don't have continuous energy eating compute requirement. But now if you have AI, local storage, local servers running your AI agents, that's going to be easy for people to start harvesting stranded energy and your home energy. So I think Scott is right. We're at a very early stage, and I think I'm really proud of our company as one of the early starter for open sourcing home mining, and I do think that's very important for human race.
Good. I just want to we're talking about the Bitcoin returning to its roots and the roots of mining. There's an early post by Satoshi, a forum post, and he talks about heat reuse, right? He talks about these miners could, as well as mine Bitcoin, could heat your office, right? Obviously, it was CPU mining at the time, but we've known about this, like, for the entire time Bitcoin has been around, that there's a potential for heat reuse, for capturing this, this waste product. Sorry, Tyler, it's not a waste product, but so we've known about it, but none of the major manufacturers have leaned into this, right? I'd say 99.9% of the machines of the miners manufactured out there are not targeted towards capturing, towards heat reuse, towards going after stranded energy, intermittent power, and it's going to take the open source community, these builders, to build these products to go after this, which is very clearly, and has been for a while, is the future of Bitcoin mining, right? This is how we decentralize. This is how we get hash rate into the homes in meaningful quantities, right? Is have it attached to a water heater, have it attached to a space heater. It's the amount of energy that is used for electrical heat is absolutely insane. If even a small portion of that it could be captured for Bitcoin mining, it would fundamentally change where the hash rate comes for securing the Bitcoin network. So it really is the roots of Bitcoin mining, but it just has never been implemented. It's so strange.
Let me jump in here real quick. So I think you have a good point. I think heat reuse is extremely important, but let me be extremely clear about what is open source and what is sort of open I/O. You can have a closed source device, but then you can have its API documentation published, and you can still integrate it with home automation and be able to control its heat output and use it. So I think we have to be clear that there's three separate things here. There's open source software, there's open source hardware, and then there's proprietary devices which give you API access with proper documentation. So you can still integrate them into your systems. It's not that you have to have everything open source to be able to interact with it, right? Like your iPhone, or there's so many systems that are closed, but they allow you to interact with it. Any of the proprietary heaters. Let me, I think, also delineate between open source software and hardware. I think a lot of people think I hate open source. I don't. I hate open source hardware. I think open source software has proven itself. It's been around for decades. It's extremely successful. Open hardware, to me, has not proven itself yet. There is actually no large-scale open source hardware that you can go buy today. Not a phone, not a mic, not nothing, right? Not a car, not a fridge. It just does not really exist out in the real world. So when we say open source is inevitable, to me it's more like open source hardware has so far proven to be impossible, not inevitable. And I think everybody has a right to choose what they decide, right? As a hardware developer, you can open your work and say, now I'm gonna seek a foundation funding to keep working on my project. That's a fair choice. I respect that. But I think promoting a FOSS or GTFO idea, I can't go along with that. You believe in FOSS, you have a right to believe that. I don't believe in that. I think what FOSS or GTFO has done, like this is your motto for Two's Foundation, it's created a rift in the builders community where people have picked sides, and instead of building together, they're kind of coming at each other with pitchforks. I think we need to let the market decide if open hardware proves out to be successful. From what I know, Satoshi mined with proprietary hardware. He had no problem with it. He never complained. Every single block that has been found over the last 12 or 13 years in Bitcoin is all with proprietary chips. Bitcoin is open source, but that's just the source code. Hardware is a completely different story. I think we've got to keep the two separate and just understand that there's a difference here.
As Bitcoiners, we are very used to rejecting the status quo, especially in the name of freedom, which is what open source provides. Obviously you can do whatever you want, but if given the choice, I'm going to go for freedom, which is what open source provides. And sure, you're right, it hasn't been done in hardware, but I don't care. Let's fucking go. We're gonna do this.
Scott, so your OSMU's motto is FOSS or GTFO, dismantling the proprietary empire and demand open source. I don't think even you guys are living up to your motto, because I will challenge you for your upcoming hashathon or telehash, demand open source. Say I don't want hash rate from Bitmain ASICs. Just guys with BitX and NerdQX, let's do a telehash with that, and we'll see how that goes.
I would like to add a little color to that debate.
Please.
People are arguing about industrial use of Bitcoin mining as a way to gain profit, and opposed to Bitcoin mining itself as a technology. I think Bitcoin mining in the early days are not for profit, because people were doing that just because it was cool, not because they thought the Bitcoin tokens will appreciate over time that amount of money. But now people are doing that more for money, for Bitcoin as the token, but not for Bitcoin mining itself. I think it's important to find a second route or a third different use case for people, because I'm a believer that when there is a use case, there will be hardware fitting into that use case. Heat recycling is one of these most important use cases nowadays, and in order to use them as a toilet cover, as a bathtub, the old form factors won't work. That's why open source is important, because manufacturers like us can empower the community to design all sorts of form factors and enable heat recycling, grid balancing, maybe pet carrying. I don't know. So things like that could really diversify Bitcoin mining and kind of uncover different use cases.
I hate to do this, but we are going to have to start or they put a little more time on. There we go. All right, cool. Yeah, sorry. I do want to expand on this a little more since we have a little time on the hardware side of things. I'm curious, what's it going to take to achieve that open source hardware and leave the proprietary grips of that? I'm curious if you can expand on, either of y'all want to expand on what will it take to win there?
I mean, the ideal in Bitcoin mining would be to have a fully open source ASIC, right? Have all the components be open source. That's fantastic. We should work towards that. Obviously, there's a lot of problems, right? These chips are made in cooperation with the foundry, TSMC. Parts of those chips are property of TSMC. You can't just be like, this is my design, I'm going to open source it. Obviously, that's the ideal. But I think that is that's sort of being a purist about the entire stack being open source. It isn't even necessary. I think it's actually just kind of like a dig on someone who doesn't want open source. But we don't need the entire stack to have open source, right? We're incrementally adding freedom to the project by making more and more components open source, right? The BitX, the projects from the 256 Foundation, the hardware projects, they are open source. There is a point to, I can say, you can go here, the source is there, right? You can take it, you can build on it. We're working towards this ideal of having the whole stack open source, but that doesn't mean we can't, have these incremental stages as we go along.
I think open source hardware I think it should really be called open hardware, not open source hardware. As far as I know, none of your products have any third-party open source certification, right? I mean, you say they're open source, but if I look at the license, it's an open hardware license, not an open source hardware license. That's an important...
The source code is right there. I don't know what else to say. Like, there is the source for this project, the reproducible source.
It's not
right
because
there.
there's proprietary components like the ASIC that, it's a black box.
That doesn't matter. That is not a prerequisite for it being open source.
Open hardware, not open source. Their license is open hardware, not open source. They're two separate things.
Open hardware is, there's an open API, right? No, this is actually the source. You can take that, like you would take software and give it to your compiler to build a binary. You can take this source and you can give it to a manufacturer to build the hardware. That is the source for how it is built.
Well, if you can source the ASIC chip, which is hard to get, the ESP32, which is proprietary, and a host of other components. But,
that does not matter. That literally does not matter. Those are things that you can go and buy. Like open source software can run on closed source hardware. You can compile closed source binaries into Linux. Linux is still open source. It does not change anything.
Okay, I think without splitting hairs about, is there really a difference here? I'll go back to the point about, is it really even possible to build an open source ASIC? New gen ASIC chips require something like $50 billion to build, right? The fab, the development. Entire nation states have tried this for decades and failed at it. I mean, famously China with SMIC, how long have they tried and they're still behind Taiwan and US? So I think to expect that somebody's gonna invest $50 billion and you just give it away, open source it, I think that's actually freedom minimizing, because you took all that work and you said basically light it on fire, right? Because they didn't get paid for that work. So I think if you are sold out open source, that's freedom maximizing, but to the developer, you actually took all that work and gave it away, open it up, right? So they can't get paid for it now.
You can get paid for open source, especially in hardware. Hardware is actually a brilliant thing to open source because there's always a cost to hardware. You can always sell it, right? It's not copy paste like software.
Yeah, but if the design's open, China is going to copy it, and there goes your market.
But we have this exponential level of growth, right? It's like we're not stopping here. Yes, China has copied the BitAxe left and right, but we're not stopping here. It is going to be impossible to catch up when you're just copying.
I think we can debate. Ultimately, the market in the long term is going to decide what works, what doesn't. From what I see, there are 0 large open source hardware manufacturers. So to me, the market has already proven that this hasn't worked. Maybe it'll work in the future, but we'll find out. I guess this is a debate where we have to agree to disagree and let the market decide how things pan out. But irrespective of who's right,
Bitcoin is not the world reserve currency either. But does that mean we're stopping? Nope.
I really hate to cut this off, but see, I told y'all we needed a 6-hour window. We do need to wrap for time, but I'm telling you, we can go so deep. There's so many rabbit holes in home mining itself. So to close it out, I want to go down the line and just give everyone a piece of advice on how to get an entry into home mining, whether it's doing some research on a specific topic or buying a home miner. Let's just go down the line and say, like, what does it take for a pleb to get into home mining? Leo, you want to say?
Yeah, so thanks. So the philosophy of Canaan as a provider of home mining hardware is to enable people to use hassle-free ways to get into home mining and use them to recycle heat without interrupting with your home design. So hardware has to look good, in our opinion, and it has to be easily controllable. You have full control of your security and your power with a clip on the cell phone, with an API, with your some people would just leave it and forget about it. So I think from a commercial perspective, what we're doing here is to give people easy, accessible, reasonably priced, and also nicely looking products for people to use, right? But that's from a commercial perspective. From a more of a social welfare perspective, Scott and the foundation have built a really great ground for people to get more involved, especially developers of open source home mining solutions.
Thanks, Leo. It's now more so than ever. There's amazing home mining products. The barrier to entry is lower than it's ever been. This is a fantastic time to grab something, right? You could grab a little nerd miner, right? You could grab a BitAxe. You can just do this. They're surprisingly hard to break. Don't worry about it. Just jump in. It's a fantastic rabbit hole to be in. Just start playing around. Get it. Try with the pool. Try solo mining. Try lottery mining. Try changing the settings. Overclock it. See what happens when it gets too hot. There's so much you can learn. There's people creating tons of resources. Videos, tutorials. There's social groups that you can join, right? You can come hang out with us cool dudes. Like, just jump in and give it a try. And I think you're going to enjoy it. And at the very least, you're going to learn a ton. And it's a fantastic way to get involved in Bitcoin. If you like gear and you like, tweaking on hardware and plugging things in, it's a cool, like, hands-on way to get involved with Bitcoin.
Absolutely, Avril.
Yep, get off zero. I learned that from this guy. I think everybody should own a Bitcoin miner at home now. It's really easy to buy. You can get it for under $50 in most cases. And then, tinker with it. If you like to tinker like me, these are great devices. They're super open now. A lot of the firmware you guys have built lets people play around, tinker the frequency, the hash rate, the voltage, all that stuff. And then understand that the Bitcoin network does not differentiate between open source and closed source hashes. They all secure the network. You can, no matter which one you choose, it's going to secure the network. It's going to generate you Bitcoin, and you will learn a lot in the process. So just take your first steps and buy your first Bitcoin miner if you don't have it.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for being up here with me. This has been a blast. And to everyone watching, you can find these guys, talk to them, and if you find anyone who's willing to talk about home mining, they're going to talk to you about home mining forever. So I promise you, there's plenty of resources here today. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah, let's hear it for him. Hoop and holler. Gentlemen, you have an adoring fan that would like to get a picture of you before you go off stage, if you'll set your mics down. Here on the Bitcoin Energy and Mining stage, Bitcoin 2026, we're actually bringing a little tension. Thank you, Avril and Scott. They're going to settle that backstage with a thumb war. It's going to go very well. Thank you very much.